Before we start this video, a large thank you to Yari, Cody, Jennifer, Demetrius, Zach, Laradome, Graham, Unlimited Riceworks, Josiah, Sorokin, Santiago, Link, Anthony, Corey, Rideford, Chris, and Navtech for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Hello everybody, I know I said I was going to cover ladders, but I figured we should just jump into Netcode because I'll have to refactor ladders with Netcode logic anyway immediately after, so I just decided to jump into this first. So let's start by opening the package manager and actually installing the Netcode package. Make sure you have it set to Unity registry, not my assets, so you won't see it, and then type in Netcode. And at the time of this video, Netcode is at 1.0.2 and just hit install. Sorry if I sound a bit tired, guys. I've been on the road all day and I just got home, so my voice might sound a little bit more quiet than usual. Let's add a GitHub URL and install this URL linked in the description. It's called ParrelSync, and this lets you basically run two Unity projects of the same project at the same time, which is very, very, very useful for testing multiplayer in the future. You don't need this, but it makes your project a lot easier. So you need a clones manager here. And basically, I'm just going to drag it over so you can see it. You can clone an entire project, launch both at the same time, and you can connect with multiplayer. And apologies if you hear a puppy in the background. I just brought a new puppy home, and my dog and cat are still getting used to the new life in the house. So I'm going to go to my player prefab down here, and I'm going to delete it and drag in my new one right here. So it's up to date, and I'm going to rename it to just player. I'm also going to make sure my UI, my player UI prefab is up to date because I haven't updated that in a while. I'm going to rename the scene to world scene _01. I can't believe it's been called sample scene for probably a couple years now. And then I'm going to make a new scene for the main menu scene. I'm doing this because now that we're adding in multiplayer, we have to start the network. And what we're going to do is when we start the network's going to automatically spawn us a player. So we're going to spawn the player on the main menu, and then from there you can load your game or start a new game. It connects into the world, and then we're going to load into this world. So we're going to have two scenes, one for the world and one for the main menu. Again, apologies too if there is any background noise. I have my window open as well too. It's very, very warm in here. So I'm going to delete all the world managers from the scene because I'm going to put them in the main menu scene, and they're going to carry over into the scene because we're going to use do not destroy and load. And let's jump over to the main menu scene now and drag those into the scene. So any world manager you want to make sure you're not destroying on load. I probably don't have those have that added to a lot of these yet because we haven't actually set up the project for multiple scenes. But now we're going to do that. So our camera handler as well, let's make sure that's in the scene. I'm actually going to rename that first to just camera. And I'm going to rename _player to player. And I'll rename _AI character to just AI character. This is just preference, not necessary at all. You know how I am with naming conventions at this point in time. I like things to be a very specific way. So originally this project was structured in a way where I was just showing you guys mechanics. But so what I'm trying to say is it's not set up to launch like a video game from the title screen. So we got to do that first because right now it's just a bunch of mechanics in a scene. But let's start by actually dragging our UI and making a canvas object. We need to do this, and let's make an empty game object first actually for the world network manager. So this is going to be for our netcode stuff. Let's add a network manager script to that, which you should have now if you install netcode for game objects. You're going to see we have a slot here for the player prefab. We have one for network prefabs, and then we have one for the Unity transport. Now, don't worry, we're going to get into all this. You don't need to know what that does right now. Just add the Unity transport component to the script and drag it in there. So in the player prefab, you can drag in your player's prefab, and what that's going to do is every time a player connects to your game, it'll spawn them a player object, whichever one you've specified here. So we're going to use that. That's very handy. Now, I'm going to drag the World Network Manager down here to create a prefab for it, and I'm going to right-click UI, and I'm going to make a canvas. And the reason why I want to make a canvas is because we're going to need to make a button, because we're going to use this button, and if you don't have Text Mesh Pro installed, click Import TMP Essentials. So I made a button here to show. We're going to make this button. We're just going to make this when we click this button. It's going to start the network for us, and that will spawn a player in the scene. So let's give it its own canvas first. And that will spawn a player in the scene, and from there we can load into our game world. And if you want to start your game, by default it will start off as the host, but we're going to make it later so when you connect to somebody, you'll connect as a client instead. So let's call this main menu canvas, and I'm going to make a script. First I'm going to make it scale with screen size 1920 by 1080 is the standard, so I'll set that up as so. I'm going to take a sip of tea. So let's make a UI image for the background. I'm just going to make mine just all black. And untick raycast target if you're not intending to click this because it just wastes memory. So any UI image that you have that you're not intending to click, just untick that box. Hold Alt. I'm going to scale it to the same size as the canvas here now. So there we go. And we got something to work with. I'm going to add a, what's it called again? I think it's called a canvas. Let's see here. Canvas canvas group here to this and set the alpha to 0. So we can just toggle that on when we start the game and go into the world scene and just leave it at 0 and run the main menu scene, so we're not interacting with that at all. Then let's go to the main menu here, add another image. I'm going to scale it up the same size, and I'm just going to untick raycast target, and I'm going to drag in a banner I made in Photoshop very quickly, just so I have something up there that's just not a black screen. And I'm going to tick preserve aspect ratio so it keeps its original aspect I made it in Photoshop as. I'm going to rename this to banner, and now I'm going to right click and actually create the button I was going to create earlier. And this button is going to be just basically press start. Actually, I'll make a empty game object first here for menu options, make that the full size of the screen, then I'll put the button under that so we have it separate from the banner in the background. So this button, I'm just going to call it press start, and as it suggests, you just press a button to start the game, and when you do this, it's going to start the network up and spawn our player in, and from there it'll auto select a new game button, and if you hit new game, it's going to log you into the world under a new save file. Untick raycast target if you're not using, or if you're only using a controller. If you have mouse and keyboard support too, just keep it ticked. Just going to change the color here, not going to spend too much time on this. And again, I go into really great detail into everything I'm saying here, and I go at a lot slower pace in my Elden Ring and Unity series, literally episode 1. So if you guys are very new to Netcode, I strongly recommend checking it out. You can follow this along too. I'm just probably going to go a little bit faster. I really explain everything I do in that series, so I strongly recommend you check it out if you are really new to Netcode. But you can get by if you're just watching this now and following along with me, I'm sure. If you made it this far in the series, for sure you'll get by. Okay, so I'm just going to position this button to a place where I think it's half decent, and then I'm going to add a main menu manager script to our main menu canvas. And this is just going to basically handle any logic that's on the title screen only. So starting a new game, loading a new game, swapping out different buttons. If you want to put your create a class menu here, you can put all the options for that in here as well. Good at putting in a namespace as is per tradition, and I'm going to erase the start and update functionality. Now on the press start button, let's just change the selected color here to red so we know when it's highlighted. And then we're going to add, I think it's 4 on-click events we need. So I'm just going to hit this button a few times to add a few of them. I'm going to take a sip of tea. Okay, so yeah, that's 4. So the first we need to do is start the network. So let's go to our main menu script here and make a public void for start network as host. And you'll notice when you play Dark Souls or Elden Ring, when you press the start button on the title screen, you'll notice a bunch of things happen. It loads all your character saves and it starts the network. So this is what this is for, essentially. A lot of times the press start button in games does serve a purpose. It's to let everything load up, essentially. So let's drag in the main menu script and let's attach our function to it and start network as host. And then we're going to disable the game object of this press start button. And then we're going to enable a new game object, which I haven't made yet. So let's create an empty game object. I'm just going to call this main menu, because this will consist of new game, low game, yada, yada, yada. I'm going to go to scene so I can see it. I'm going to hold Alt, make it the same size as my canvas. I'm going to disable it by default. And then I'm going to go back here on the button and drag it in there and then enable it when you click this button. Now, we need to make a new button in this main menu. So I'm going to copy this old button and paste it here as a child. And I'm just going to erase all the on-click events on this because, again, this is a copy of the press start button. So you're going to get the same on-click events. Just erase all these. And I'm going to, on my original press start button, on the last space I have, drag in my new game button and hit button.select. So after it hides this button, it automatically selects the new game button. Now, right now, the new game button doesn't do anything. That's okay. So under Start Network as host, let's call upon the Singleton Network Manager, which we now have. But first we need to say using unity.netcode. And we get this now because we installed the Netcode package. And the Network Manager is the thing we attach to the World Network Manager in our scene. It has a singleton, so we can reference it from the script. We just say start host, just like that. And we save. Okay, so now let's, if we press play, we're going to get some errors definitely. So yeah, what do we have first here? Okay. So let's try this again. And if I click start here, we have UI manager start not set up to a, so it's because we don't have the player variable on the UI, the UI manager. So erase everything on start here and erase player on the wake. And we're going to have to do a lot of reorganization because now we're launching this game from the main menu and we're spawning in the player after. But we'll get it done. It's just going to take a few episodes. So let's go here, make sure that's public, the player. What we want to do, and also replace this input system on your event system if you didn't, we want to basically assign the UI manager a player when the player spawns if they are the local player. And that's going to be pretty easy to do. So first, let's go to our player prefab and make sure it has a network object script attached to it. This is mandatory if you're using this as a network object, and we are because we're using Netcode. So go to add component and make sure you're doing your prefab and add a network object script. There we go. Cool. Now, I'm just going to keep starting the game and see what errors we can find. You can see it spawns here. So you see our player has spawned in the scene. That's good. But we're going to get some errors because things are broken. So there's no health bar because we don't have the UI manager anymore, or the health bar set up on the dragon. So what I'm trying to say is we basically have to set this up ourselves. So let's erase these variables here for all the health bars. Okay, and just keep these errors here for now. Let's go to the UI manager and let's make this a singleton because there's only ever going to be one in the scene and only the local player should have it. So let's add a variable for the health bar, stamina bar, and the focus point bar. I'm just going to put these under the HUD area and I'm going to take a sip of tea. Okay, that looks good. So after we've done that, let's just go over here now to the character stats manager, or actually come over here to the character stats manager script, and you see it derives from model behavior. Let's say using unity.netcode. Make sure you say unity.netcode, not unityengine.networking, because they are different. And instead of deriving from model behavior, make it derive from network behavior. This is still a model behavior, but it has a bunch of extra stuff we can do. We can now check for a variable called isOwner. What is isOwner? Well, as I type it, I'm going to describe it. So let's say if isOwner, then do all these things. Owner, basically, when you spawn in someone's game, when someone spawns in your game, rather, a game object pops up in your game for them. Now, you don't own that game object, so you're not the owner. But your game object is for you. That makes you the owner of it. So isOwner just checks if you do own this object. So on the UI manager, let's say public UI manager. And let's make it static, so it's a singleton. And I'm going to call mine instance. You can call yours singleton if you like that keyword better. There's honestly no difference at all. I just like using the keyword instance. So it's the same, really. Now, you can use a getter and setter if you prefer for setting up the singleton. And I recommend it if you're working with people especially. But I'm going to just make a check here and say if the instance is null, then the instance is equal to this. Else, if it's not null, then I want to destroy this game object because there's more than one in the scene and we don't want that. Okay. That's good. Now let's save that. Now I'm going to go back over to the player stats manager, and everywhere I see, first I'm going to say UI manager.instance.player is equal to this. Whoops, that's supposed to be is equal to player. So and then just paste UI manager.instance over here where you want to call upon your bars, and then you're good to go. Okay, so I'm just going to basically save this now, and I'm going to place in the UI manager singleton wherever I see an error for these original HP, stamina, and focus point bars. So you're probably going to need a few. Also, this should be this. It should be player right there. So I'm going to now save this and go back into the project window, and it's going to show me where I have errors. Yeah, so here we go. On the player stats manager, just wherever you see an error, place UI manager.instance and reference the specific bar you're trying to target to change. All right, I think that's it there. Oh, there's a couple more down here. Let's save that. Minimize it. And I have another one over here on the player stats manager again. Save that. And I have one more down here. I think that is it. Oh, the focus points bar. There we go. And I spelled that wrong again. Focus point bar. Save. Okay, cool. So that's working. Now make sure you drag in your variables for your health bar, your stamina bar, and your focus point bar. Now, guys, we're going to have to do a fair amount of reorganization into the order of operations of how we call things because we're setting this game up now to launch from this menu. So we're going to have to do this with a couple more things, like the camera, for instance. Right now, make sure your camera's in the scene. If you start the game, you get an error, and the error is saying, hey, we don't have a target transform. That's because the camera doesn't have a player, because you're not really instantiating the player until we start the network. So let's get rid of the player manager and the target transform variable from the camera handler. And now we're going to learn how to use on-network spawn coupled with the isOwner pool. So let's make sure the player manager variable appears public. Let's make a singleton for this camera handler, just like we did for the UI, because there's only one ever in the game, and it should be given to the local player. So if someone connects to your game, you get the camera, they don't get the camera, and on their end, they have the camera, you don't have the camera. So let's do the same we did before. I'm going to say if instance is equal null, instance is equal to this, else destroy the game object because there is already one in the scene. Again, if you're working with more people, it's a lot safer to use getter and setters so you can't accidentally override this variable, but I'm just going to use the singleton function I have set up right now like this. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to jump back over into the project. I'm going to look for the character manager. Since it's the base class, the player manager, I'll be saying using unityengine.netcode, and then I'll make it derive as a network behavior so it gets all that extra functionality. I'm then going to jump over to the player manager and also say using unity.netcode, and we're going to then set up an override for on-network spawn. See, the on-network spawn is a function you can override that you get when you're using a network behavior, and it's called when the network object is spawned into the scene. And when it is spawned into the scene, it is assigned a bunch of data like who the owner is and all that good stuff. So from there, we can kind of use it to determine if this is a local player or not. Since this is a player manager, if you're the owner of this, because it's a player object, it means this has to be your local game object. And if it's your local game object, then you want to give it the camera and the UI because it's you. So for example, if another person connects to your game, they get a player object too. But on your end, you won't have the flag is owner is true because you're not the one who owns that game object, they do. So there's only one local player per game, and that's who we want to assign this stuff to. So go to the player stats manager, make a public void. Let's just call it set. You can call it set HUD or set stat bars, HUD for heads up display. And then I'm going to copy everything in here and just paste that in there. And then I'll get rid of is owner. So we just have just this right now. And then over the player manager on network spawn, we say if is owner, and then we call player stats manager, and then we set up our HUD. Now we do something similar for the camera as well, because we need to tell the camera, hey, this is the player you're supposed to follow when you start the game. So we're going to do that as well. So let's save that, and this will only happen now if you are the owner. So if another game object or another player spawns in your game, they won't get your HUD and they won't get your camera. So let's say camera handler dot instance, and I put that as a capital C, as in the singleton. And then we can say player manager is equal to this. I'm going to rename that to player. Now we could just stop here, but there's a couple more things we need to do as well. So I'm actually going to make a function on this camera to kind of assign the camera just like I did with the UI. See how we have a target transform here? So I'm going to make a public void, and I'm just going to call this assign camera to player. You can call it setup camera, or honestly, set camera to player, whatever you want to call it, as long as it's clear to you what this function does and it's not confusing in any way. Just make it something that's very clear to you. So I'm going to make it require a player manager in order to set this up. And then I'm going to say, I can't remember its target position. I think it's target transform. I'm just going to double check. Yes, it is target transform. Here it is. So I'm going to say target transform equals player.transform, and that is basically the transform that the camera follows. It's been a while, so I'll just say that as a refresher in case some people forget. And we have a couple more things we want to sub to, but we can come back to the camera handler now first, and right above that we can say player is equal to player, and we want to say this dot player is equal to the player we pass, as in this variable on this script is equal to the player manager variable that we pass over. And then we can say camera handler instance dot assign camera to player and pass this as in this player manager. And this only happens if you're the owner, so only the owner gets the camera. And then over here we say input handler is equal to player dot input handler, because I believe this script requires an input handler as well. All right, so let's save. I got another null reference, right, the poison bars. So remove the poison bars from the player effects manager and bring them over to the UI manager, same as you did with the health bar, stamina bar, and focus point bar. Make them public so we can both reference them and drag them in the inspector. And just the same as before, you want to say UI manager.instance in front of the errors that you get, because that's the new place of reference for these variables. So guys, a lot of these videos will be basically setting up Netcode, but also rearranging our logic to work with Netcode structure, because it all needs to perform a certain way, and we need things to basically launch in a certain order of operations. So this is all very, well, definitely important. You can do it a million different ways, I'm sure, but it's all for a purpose is what I'm trying to say. So let's erase the poison buildup and poison amount bar from the awake, because we're not calling it there anymore. We're referencing it from a UI manager. Let's drag them in the inspector so we don't get an error for a null reference. It's very important. And then let's save the project again. So now let's go to the new game button. And I'm just going to change that from press start to new game. And we can add a vertical layout group here. So when we add more buttons in the future, it kind of arranges them automatically for us. I'm going to put mine on middle center, and I'm actually going to unhide the game objects just so I can see where it pops up. Okay, so I'm going to take this now and kind of just size it down a little so it's like, you know, lower on the screen. And then when I'm done and I'm content with that, I'm going to uncheck the is active check mark here, so it's disabled until we enable it via the menu itself. Now in new game, I'm going to add an on click event here. I'm going to basically use the main menu manager script to create a new function. First, I'm going to say using Unity, I believe it's Unity Engine actually, .c management. Let me see, Unity Engine.c, yeah, so Unity Engine.c management. And we're going to use this basically to load a scene. And let's make public void start new game. In the future, I can, if you guys want, I can hook up the save functionality we made and actually write a new file here if you're unsure how to do it. But it is pretty straightforward if you've watched the save videos before. Let's make a serialize field for the world scene index. And let's just say scene management. And then we're going to say dot load scene. And then we pass the world scene index. And that's just going to load the scene we specify. So if you didn't know, I'm sure you did. If you're this late into a series, you're definitely an intermediate. Every scene has a build index. So it's just a number basically. So let's go down and make this on-click event run this function. And let's check the build index of our scene. So if I go up here to edit and I go to, file, build settings, you can see this one's 0. Okay, so make sure it's added here. If it's not added, click add open scenes. Let's save this and let's go to our world. So let's go to scenes, world scene 01, save this before we leave. And I'm going to delete my player after. First, I'm going to go in here and click add open scenes. You can see my build index for this is 1. So that's the scene number we want to use, or the build index we want to use rather. I'm going to delete my player from here. And I'm going to just basically delete anything I don't need. Let's delete the player UI as well. It shouldn't be here because we put that on the menu scene now. And that looks good. So come back here now to the main menu scene. Let's go to the main menu canvas, change the world scene index to 1. And then I'm going to go back into the script here. Let's go over to the player manager. That looks good. Just checking this over. Okay, so on start here, right below base.start, put do not destroy on load and pass this so this game object survives the scene change. Do this on the player manager start. Also do it on your UI manager after you've assigned it as a singleton. If you do it before, then just do it after. You make sure the singleton is not null first. And do it on the camera handler as well. This will just basically make it so your UI and your camera survives the scene change no matter where you're going. So if I start the game here now, I'm definitely going to get another error, I think. Let's see, press start, new game. Okay, so our player spawns, here we go, that's good. Have we hit new game? No, okay, we're good. Excellent, so we still have lots to do. Basically, we have to set it up so in the next episode, another person can connect to us, which is what we're going to do. And then we have to start changing a lot of our variables to something called network variables. And we have to make, or rather place checks on our player manager scripts so that you can only control your player and the other person can only control theirs. And it sounds a bit intimidating if you haven't done it before, but I promise it is very simple. If you're very new to Netcode though, if you know nothing about it, I would strongly advise you to check out the Elden Ring series. Not if you want to finish the whole series, but even just to see Netcode, because I start with Netcode immediately on episode 1 of that series, and I really explain it in great detail. Whereas in this series too, this is going to be a lot of basically configuring what we already have to work with Netcode, which can be a little bit overwhelming if you didn't start with Netcode. So you want to go watch those few videos, and in return, it will all seem a lot easier to you, I'm sure. And if you don't, that's okay too. I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching. If you want to leave a like and drop a comment, I would greatly appreciate you and your existence. Also, as always, guys, a special thank you to my patrons. I love you guys, and thank you for tuning in. And apologies if you hear my dog barking. I don't think I can edit that out, so it's probably going to be there. I'll see you guys next week.